Hello, and thanks for joining us today. I'm really glad that you're here because we've got something really cool we're going to dive into, which is how you can make bold and informed decisions. Look, how do you make decisions now? Are you doing it the right way? Are you confident? You need to really be able to do this the right way, especially as a business owners, because, and I can tell you along the way, there's so many decisions that I've made, and there's many of them that I get to, and I'm like, wow, this could make us or this could break us. And when it comes to those moments, your ability to make bold and informed decisions really determines the fate of your company and the fate of your financial future as well. So with us today is Asif Muhammad. Now he is an entrepreneur that entrepreneurs turn to for solutions, a passionate investor. He's held many senior financial and strategic positions, including CEO and CFO for a wide range of ventures encompassing all aspects of the business world. 2011, he became the CEO of Main Course Associates, having joined the firm in 2008, a specialist consultancy delivering growth-focused business solutions to the restaurant and hospitality industry. He's grown Main Course into a successful international concern with a stellar client roster and branches in London, Italy, Spain, and the United States. And through Main Course, Asif leveraged his and his network's skills and experiences, transforming his clients' enterprises through an injection of sound business disciplines, market knowledge, financial engineering, strategic, and operations as well. Now, he has worked with national and international groups and high-end restaurants, helped clients expand abroad, and established foreign companies in the UK as well. Asif, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure. Glad to be here.
Well, I'm glad that you're here, man, because you've done a lot of really cool things. And I think this topic is very important because, like I said, I've had those situations before, many of which as an entrepreneur that I'm like, wow, like this is the moment where if I go choose wrong here, like we go downhill quick. And then if I choose right, then we things skyrocket. So what do you think when it comes to strategic planning? You know, how can strategic planning help overall with basically the growth of a business?
I think the number one point really about this, Ty, is that we've got to understand where we're going. Far too many times the issues happen because people don't sit down and strategically plan their route or route, as you guys call it in America. Where are they going? And that's very important to understand, because once you've highlighted that, decision making then becomes quite easy. Years ago, I attended a military course which was all about teamwork and bold decision making. And one of the things they told us, I mean, they took us in the forest and said, okay, well, there's no maps here. We're going to give you a glass of water and 3 sticks, different measurements, and you have to go from A to B. And you know, off you go, and you had to find the way. One of the best things that we learned from that was understanding where we are now and where we are going. Once we'd established that, there's 100 different routes that you could take. And so ultimately, I always say the first step is understand where you're right now and where you're going. And then along the way, you need to have the ability to make that bold decision. Interestingly, decision is one of those topics that I tend to find that it isn't taught in school. Like, nobody teaches us how to make a decision. And so, you know, I know further down we'll speak more on this, but I think to answer your question, the key is understand where you are now, where you're going, because then it will help you plan out the route.
Makes perfect sense. What are the key factors you think to success with doing strategic planning the right way?
I think for me, the things that have always worked are having a big vision. What is your vision? I mean, what sort of sparks that entrepreneurial spirit in you? Are you really wanting and looking for something big in life? Because if you aren't, then actually, you know, it's a bit of higgledy-piggledy situation. So you've got to have the big vision, because once you do, you can then sit back and say, okay, cool, I'm now going to plan out my route through this like that. And, you know, it's a little bit like, imagine leaving a ship, or a ship that's leaving the harbor. If you don't put in the GPS where this is going, I bet you sort of, if it leaves the harbor at all, it will probably end up somewhere on a derelict island. And so, you know, therefore, having that vision about where we're going, what is it that we're trying to achieve here, and then start to strategically plan it.
Yeah, I'm really surprised at how many people don't do that. And what I think is interesting is that when I finally built that in my mindset, how much different it is, meaning that I constantly find myself and my team solving problems, and then we just don't even know the goal. And then when we just step back and say, like, what are we really trying to accomplish or what's the goal? It's like, oh, and then we just see things from a different perspective. Why is that so hard for entrepreneurs to figure out? Like, we're busy solving problems without stopping to really figure out where we're even going to be able to get the best course to get there.
This is an interesting observation that you make, because entrepreneurship to me is actually all about solving problems. Because, entrepreneurship is you find a real issue in the world, and then you take it and say, I'm going to help sort it out. And then you find a solution for it, and that hopefully turns into a really, really cool business. But in doing so, we end up solving or doing a lot of day-to-day trivia, and we think that that's actually problem solving, and we're nurturing the business and it's moving forward. But actually it isn't. We just end up getting caught up in the day-to-day trivia. But again, this comes back to it. We sort of have weekly goals in our organization. I mean, we start with a decade-long vision, because I think so many people start with sort of yearly plans, and 2 months in, they sort of throw in the towel. I think you can have a big vision. So what we do is we have 10-year goals or visions, and then we break them down into 5-year chunks, and then all the way down to weekly. So, annually, then biannually, then quarterly, and then weekly. As a result of that, every time something comes to you, it puts things in perspective, and you realize, is this problem even a problem? Or is this problem even worth solving in the spirit of what we're trying to achieve here?
It's interesting. And if you figure that out, if you know the goal of where you're going, what have you found are kind of the best steps to work backwards for what you guys are doing and what you found success-wise to then, like, the plans, the steps of strategic planning to get to that end goal?
I think the key would be you make up your plan, and then you say, okay, well, what is that problem that we're trying to solve? You look back and you start to monitor the choices that are around you. And one of the best ways we felt was to empower people. Far too many times, we end up trying to solve all the problems by ourselves. The best way of doing that is by actually delegating it to the people, but then empower them to make the decision, and understand that bottom-up approach very often is the right approach, whereby you're not enforcing decisions on somebody, you're empowering people to try and make those decisions. And once they've bought into your vision, so we've always felt that that's quite an important thing, to get the people to buy into your vision. And once they do, then when you empower them, it really turns out to provide the best result that you need.
What do you think? Do you have kind of a code or things that you think need to be considered before a decision is made? Like, do you have a process that you go through before making big decisions of things that should be considered before you end up making that decision?
So interestingly, one of my mentors, Bob Proctor, I learned this from him, and I have to say, it's been life-changing, really. We've made some, interestingly, very critical decisions with relative ease, because we followed this process. It's called a 3-3-3 step. And basically the way that this works is that you draw up on a board. So basically all the key people about to make a decision gather in a room. And you draw up on a board, one person has to take charge. So you stand up and you say, this is what we're trying to do. And then you draw up a column and say, this column states why we can, and this column says why we can't. So what is it that we're trying to do, why we can, and how we can't. And then what you do is you put a big cross in the section of why and how we can't. So basically cannot is not even an option anymore. So now what happens is that you go through all the options of how a decision can be made, what are the solutions that you can implement, and then you go through them and analyze them and make that choice. And ultimately it ends up being saying, once you've narrowed it down to 3, you then have to pick one. But we always felt that by the time you eradicate this from your head, that cannot is not an option, then you have to focus on solutions that will happen. So having the big vision, using this strategy, being solutions oriented, and then absolutely making a decision and saying, right, we have to pick one of these 3 now and going to do it. And frankly, if you make the wrong decision, you can always, make the right one later. The key is that so many times we end up in a state of what I call ambivalence, which is, shall I do it? Shall I not do it? Do we do it? How do we do it? Ambivalence is a really, really bad state of mind, frankly. And basically, Oxford Dictionary will tell you that ambivalence is coexistence of 2 conflicting ideas in somebody's head. And decision will simply eradicate that. You can save so much time by just going ahead and making the decision. So if you Google the 333 step formula by Bob Proctor, I think you'll see it. But hopefully I've explained it in enough detail so you understand.
What about evaluating the decision? And that's one of the things is, well, I want to talk about two things actually. Before I get to that, what about mitigating risks? How do you minimize the risks of making a bad decision, or what can happen if you make a bad decision?
Look, so Jeff Bezos, interesting, I was listening to him the other day, and he was saying something about sleep, because somebody was asking him from the audience that, look, how much do you sleep? And he was saying, well, I sleep best part of 8 to 9 hours in a day. The reason I do that is because as an executive, I need to make 3 or 4 very, very sound decisions in a quarter. And if I do that, actually, my firm can follow the process, and actually everything then will be fine because I've empowered people in along the way. And so if you think about it, we end up, as you started by saying, that we end up sitting down, solving problems, and then we realize, what are we doing here? If you eradicate as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, as an executive, the 3 or 4 key decisions that you need to make, and that happens by empowering others, because they will tell you, they will give you the feedback loop mechanism. But I tend to sort of sit down and say, right, what are those high-level key decisions that nobody else can make and I need to make them? I then take vote, I take advice from everybody, but once I've reached that stage, then I'll just go ahead and make it. And frankly, a couple of times it's happened that I made the wrong decision, but the fact that I was very quick in making a decision allowed me enough time to go back and adjust it later. What often happens is we spend so long making the bloody decision that by the time we've made it, it's far too late. We don't have that legroom anymore to try and change it if we need to. So yeah, I suppose my thing really is that I because I've empowered people, I then take their advice and look at all the options that are around me and sort of understand that actually, if I make it quick enough, I have enough runway left. In case it isn't right, I can always go ahead and change it.
How do you evaluate whether it was right or wrong? I guess just based on whether you got the desired outcome?
Well, I think that's it, isn't it? What's great is because we've taught ourselves, and again in our firms, that one of the key things is that you break these goals into small chunks. So rather than having to wait an entire year to see the outcome, we are looking at the outcome on a weekly basis, right? And so if you realize that 2 or 3 weeks have gone by and things aren't moving in the way that they need to, that tells you that you need to start rejigging it. So, you got to make the decision and then set up KPIs, key performance indicators, that tell you along the way pretty quickly about what is happening. And if the outcome isn't happening, then you need to sort of make some changes.
How, along the way, what do you do to get your team to make better decisions? Because I love your framework, but a large part of it succeeds based on them making better decisions themselves. So what kind of training are you doing to help your team make better decisions? Well,
the very first one is really getting their buy-in into the vision, because when they do, then you realize that actually they feel part of this project. They are not employees anymore. They're stakeholders. We actually don't use the word employees in our organizations at all. We call them stakeholders and partners. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is that we have a 3-month rolling training process. And what we tend to do is that we use sort of non-financial trivia to activate the decision-making capacity in everybody. So for instance, one of the things that we do is that we have an allowance available for everybody for training, and we give it to them and we tell them to choose the course that they need to do, but then they need to sort of want to do in terms of training, but then we give them a very specific timeline to say, within this, you have to make this decision and go ahead and do it. What tends to happen is that you find that decision-making actually is a habit more than anything else. And when people understand that they can come out of this shell that often they're in, what if I make the bad decision? Shall I do this? Shall I not do this? Once they just start to get in the habit of decision making, actually it all starts to pull together. So buying in the vision is very important, and them feeling empowered and not being afraid, because I think sometimes the problem is that there's always this worry that, oh, what if I make the wrong decision? Do I get fired? Well, no, look, I put you in the position of empowerment. If you make the wrong decision, nothing's going to happen. We will go ahead and sort it out, but you need to follow the same steps that we followed as executives. And as a result, it tends to work for us so far, I have to say.
Yeah, and that's something that I think I've adopted with my team too. Is that, I tell my team, look, you need to fail. It's okay. I want
Yeah,
you to fail, because if you don't fail, then you're not trying anything new. But
yeah,
you can't fail twice for the same reason. That's like my
absolutely.
one rule. Like, you got to learn from the failure and then apply it and move on. Is that something similar to the way you lead as well?
It's so true, so true. So one of the things that we've sort of said to everybody is that, look, we will have no problem if you lose money for the organization if it was the wrong decision. That's not a problem. But by you losing money by not making a decision, that won't be the right thing to do. So make the decision, and if it's the wrong one, no problem. We'll be fully behind you and we'll be supportive. And by harnessing this really openness of culture, it just means that they feel so empowered, and they become fearless, if you like. And actually, that's a nice position to be in when you're making a decision, because actually, if you're just worried about something else, i.e., if I make this wrong decision, will I lose my job? Well, if you're making that decision under that pressure, I'm not sure you're going to make the right one. Your focus has to be 100% on, I'm doing this or not doing this, and is that the right thing to do for the organization? And as long as your focus can be on that, you can be really, really good. So yeah, I mean, our philosophy really is that you can lose the money for the organization or make the wrong decision, no problem. But not making a decision, that's more criminal for us, quote
Yeah.
unquote.
And
Yeah.
I think it's called analysis paralysis, where people just get so caught in the details that they're afraid to make a decision. It sounds like your whole strategy is, look, you just need to make the decision, take the information you have, make the best decision you can, and then execute it. And then, like, what's the worst thing that can happen? Like, we can fix it if the decision ends up being the wrong one.
Completely. And this is exactly the key point, that if you make the decision soon enough, and i.e., you don't sit there and just continuously doing this mindless mind mapping that, oh, what if, you're losing that runway that we could have in order to refix it if something wasn't quite right. I tend to find, by the way, also on a personal level, that good decisions kind of show up in two places. And I'm sure it's the same for a business too, but also on a personal level. They show up in your calendar, and they show up in your checkbook. And the reason for that is that if you look at those two places, your calendar and your checkbook, you can see the kinds of decisions you've been making in the past. And therefore, it will tell you where you've been spending your time. So if you need to change your life, if you need to change the direction of your business, those are the two things that you need to take a look at. And hopefully you'll start to see some traction on that.
What about bold decisions? I mean, how do you really go about making bold decisions where, the information you've evaluated, it could go either way, to just have the courage to say, here's what I'm choosing. We're going all in on this.
Yeah, look, for me, that really sort of boils down to one thing. Your gut instinct. I have this thing whereby I sort of say that prayer is when we talk to God, intuition is when God talks to us. And actually, you need to start to develop your intuitive factor. It's a higher faculty that we've, as human beings, have been blessed with. For instance, animals don't have that, but we do. So if you develop this, if you focus more and more on that, I tend to find that meditation helps massively with quietening my mind, because sometimes, we have so much noise going around all of us. And so as a result, when you sit down to just try and focus on this bold decision making, you're getting a lot of noise coming through to your head. And then you end up in that space that you touched upon earlier about paralysis analysis. Whereas if you can just quieten your mind, you'll get to that higher self, where you can just sit down and say, you know what, I'm going to do this. I'm going to be fearless about it. And actually, I've done all my analysis. Now it's time to make a decision. I think Jefferson, or one of the American presidents, at one point said that by the time I've gathered enough information, I don't take a vote, I make a decision. And I think that's quite powerful.
Yeah, I read a great book by Annie Duke, Thinking in Bets, and that's kind of one of the things that she talks about. Is, look, you can't judge the outcome, the decision, the quality of a decision based on the outcome. Like, you make the decision based on all the information you have at the time, and more than likely you're going to make the right decision with the information. Doesn't work out the way you intended, so be it. Hindsight's 20/20, right? But it all comes down to taking that information you have at the time and making the best decision you can with that information.
Absolutely, and in my opinion, the word decision simply means bold decision. I don't even add the bold word. The fact is, when you're making a decision, you got to make that tough choice. You can't just make, oh, well, this is the easy one, let me do that, and then we'll see. Well, you got to go in. And actually, interestingly, if you go through if you analyze the word decision, it'll probably mean, once you've made the decision, in my opinion, it's a committed decision. We're not halfway through. We're not just going to turn back on it. We're going to see it through. We'll analyze the results. If they're not the right ones, then we can rejig it. But we are going to go in. We can't just make a decision today and change it tomorrow. We'll analyze the results, and if we need to change it, then we'll change it. But it's a committed decision. We're in it, and that's that. So I think in my book, decision and bold decision should really be one and the same thing.
Yeah, I like that you just remove bold, and then it's all basically just the decision at that point. I think that's really brilliant. Yeah. What about KPIs? You talked about that, and I can't ask you what KPIs to measure because it depends on the decision. But how do you figure that out? How do you figure out kind of what KPIs you should be based on that decision measuring before you make the decision? Or do you even need the KPIs before you make a lot of the decisions?
Yeah, I mean, so this boils down to the scenario. Is it a personal decision? Is it a family decision? Is it a business decision? And if it's a business decision, then is it a people's decision? So what we tend to do is we categorize in, I think, 4 main headings. Is it people, property, project, or profit? And so as a result of that, once we've categorized the decision in one of these categories, then you implement the relevant KPIs. So if it was a key hire, maybe we were hiring a director in a business or a new shareholder or something, then we will implement those strategies accordingly in terms of retention, increased profit share, training, and so on. If it was a financial decision that was about profit, then we would be looking at some financial KPIs, what happened to our margin? Did it increase, or is it increasing over time, and so on? So yeah, basically, we like to classify into these categories. And then once that happens, you can implement the KPIs, and we tend to find that works quite beautifully.
And do you find that you follow the same strategies in your personal life as you do business with how you make decisions?
Pretty much. I mean, as I said earlier, decision making, in my opinion, is a habit. I mentioned earlier, I've got an 8-year-old son, 8-week-old son at the moment. Hopefully, it'll be 8 years soon. I'm sure it will fly by. But one of the absolute first things I'm going to start to teach him is the ability to make decisions, because I found that, I suppose our parents did the best that they could with us, but nobody taught us on how to make decisions. And suddenly, life's upon you, and you realize that now you're on your own. You're not under that cocooned thing with your parents or your friends or family or even school. You're out there in the real world. You're going to make a decision. Nobody's taught you. What do you do? And that's why I tend to find that a lot of fresh grads, particularly these days when they come out and then they apply for jobs, a lot of them haven't actually really understood the decision making. You put them under a bit of pressure, and then they end up saying most of the time, it depends, it depends, it depends. Actually, it doesn't depend. Give me a decision. It doesn't matter if it's the right or wrong one. It's a decision. And what I'm trying to gauge here is your ability to make a decision. I'm not saying if it's going to be the right or wrong, but I often tend to find that doesn't happen. So I'd love to sort of say that we need to come up with exercises in our home life, in our work life, that sort of help hone that skill. Because frankly, in our home life, far too many times we have the same thing. Should we have pizza? Should we have curry? Should we have this? Should we? Well, make the decision and just move on.
What do you see when? Because you're an investor, you do so many different things, right? So, what do you? Where do business owners mostly mess this thing up? Like, where do they really fail to do this correctly with decision making? Is it just that they don't make decisions fast enough? Is it they don't make them? I mean, what do you find is the biggest problems?
I think one of the biggest problems is when people say, hey, what do you think? And interestingly, the person that they're asking isn't actually thinking. So I tend to find that they're saying, somebody's going to make a decision and you ask them, hey, so what about this? And then they say, hey, what do you think? Why are you asking me? You have to make that decision. And so there are 3 key issues that I tended to find. Number one, they're asking other people's opinions, either because they're afraid of it themselves or because they don't know that they need to make the decision. They're almost looking for excuses to say, well, actually, how can I get away from having to do it myself? Or sometimes they're looking for validation. That's the other thing. The second thing I find is that they are it's almost like a systemic issue about analysis paralysis. They're sitting down and analyzing it far too much in detail as opposed to making. And of course, the third one is that they're not making it fast enough, which then takes the ability or the time to change it soon enough if it wasn't the right one. And so I would love for people just to sort of take away from this and say, look, you know what? Number one, we're going to just do it. And I give the example right now. There may be a situation to many of your listeners right now that they're in the middle of making some decision, and a couple of weeks or maybe even a couple of months have passed by and they haven't yet made it. I would advise them to go away, write down on a piece of paper all the good reasons to make it and all the bad ones not to make it. Analyze them literally in a space of 5 minutes, and then make a decision and just say, you know what, it's done. You'll find that a huge burden will lift from your shoulders, because not making a decision often is probably the worst thing you can do than making the wrong one.
Well, you mentioned asking others' opinion, but on bigger decisions, doesn't that make sense? I mean, we have board of advisors and board of directors kind of for that purpose. So do you really find that some decisions really do make sense to go to next? Because I think Warren Buffett is one of the best quotes I've ever seen, which is, it's good to learn from your mistakes. It's better to learn from other people's mistakes. So if you're asking the right person, does that make sense? Not somebody that doesn't know what's going on, but somebody that's been there, done that, been faced with those decisions before. With bigger decisions, does that make sense to do?
So I would say the following, which is that what we need to learn is to ask the right questions. What do you think is not the right question? If you ask the right question and say, look, if I made this decision, in your opinion, what would happen? Have you got an experience of this happening in the past? That's a better thing to do, because when you're asking me, hey, what do you think? I'm going to give you my opinion in my own context. But my context could be completely different. You know, I own 17 different businesses. And so if somebody asks me, I'll be giving them with that spectrum on. So I think if you ask the right question from the right people, I have no problem with that. But yet again, you need to make that decision yourself, because you're in that position. Take the information, analyze it, but then you have to make the decision. But I would be saying to people, please ask the right questions to the right people. And honestly, what do you think, in my opinion, is not the right question.
A little bit off topic, but I'm interested. What are some of the strategies that you've used to effectively manage so many businesses? You said you have 17 businesses. How do you manage 17 businesses?
Yeah, 17. So, well, I mean, I think I had, when I was 8 years old, I started my first business. So this entrepreneurial spirit was always in me, and I really sort of wanted to fan it, which is why I emigrated to England from Pakistan. And I mean, I think it was just this interest and wanting more from life and wanting to solve problems in different arenas, or wanting to do things better, because I tend to find that you have two ways of starting a business. But also, by the way, this helps with decision making too. You can look at somebody's deductive ability or cognitive ability. What I tended to find was that sometimes it's so much better to look at the deductive ability, which are, as you said earlier, some other people's mistakes, and you can learn them and do it better. You know, if you think about it, Google was not the first search engine. Yahoo was, and Google did it so much better because I think they learned from all of those things. Facebook was not the first social media platform to come out, but they learned from all the others and then they made it better and stuff. So point being that I tended to find that actually there may be some things that I wanted to start and do them. Those were my cognitive sort of businesses where they started from. And some of them were deductive, whereby I saw some people doing it and I thought, there's got to be a better way of doing it. And then I said, you know what, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring and try it. The other thing was really what I said earlier when I started talking about this. I surrounded myself with the right people, with the key decision makers. I made arrangements with them. They were either business partners or key positions in the business that I owned. And I said to them, here you go, you're in charge. This is what you have to do. And just report back to me quarterly so that we can see that this is happening. So having the right people around just meant that I don't have to run all 17 businesses. I can just sit on the board and advise them, which is so much better use of my time. And actually, honestly, somebody else can do it so much better than me trying to do 17 businesses on my own. It's just so much better to have a team around you. And it's just so much more fun having people to spar with.
So this has been enlightening, and I love this. I've never had a conversation like this, especially with an expert just about decision making. Where can everybody go to learn more?
So best place would be my website, which is asifm.world. So www.asifm.world. You can also reach me on Instagram, which is official asifm. That's ASIFM. I think those two will probably be the best ones, and you'll find my other channels there in terms of LinkedIn and Facebook, etc.
Sounds good. Asif, thanks for joining us today.
Pleasure, mate. Thanks for having me.
So if you're watching this, look, you're making decisions is probably the most important thing you can do as a business owner. You do this wrong, things turn out really not well. You do this right, then the whole world's your oyster. And Asif has given us some phenomenal advice today. But if you want to learn more, go to his website. It's so cool, the things that he's doing. And, being a turnaround specialist, being, a serial entrepreneur like he is, running the businesses that he does run. And, being an author, I mean, so many things that he's done. And I think there's a lot of great information you're able to get here. So make sure you visit his website to learn more about making informed and bold decisions for yourself, your life, and your business. You can find his website at Asif, which is ASIFM, like Mary, at .world. That's asifm.world. So make sure you check it out today so you can make informed, bold decisions in your life. Thanks for tuning in. Have a great day.